Now, KMJ's Sunday Conversation with your host, Alexandre Balakian. Sponsored by Gar Bennett. At Gar Bennett, we help growers feed the world.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into an all-new Sunday Conversation exclusively here on KMJ. I'm your host, Alexandre Balakian, and may the 4th be with you. There will be no lightsaber fights today, although my guest today may think that would be more fun than talking with me. But my favorite Star Wars character, if you were wondering, Yoda. You know, just recently, George Lucas decided to make a big reveal. Why does Yoda speak backwards? Well, George Lucas said, and I'm quoting here, Yoda had a very distinctive way of talking, and it was done purposely because if you were speaking regular English, people don't listen that much. He went on to say, but if you have an accent or it's really hard to understand what he's saying, they focus on what he's saying. He was basically the philosopher of the movie, so he was talking about all the things. I had to figure out a way to get people to actually listen, especially 12-year-olds, end quote. Sorry to say we will not speaking Yoda today, so because that's really hard to do. Just a friendly program reminder, Sunday Conversation is podcasted wherever you podcast, and you can see our smiling faces right there on YouTube in high def at KMJ Sunday Conversation. Now, a bit later in the show here, an incredible sight on a trip of a lifetime this week. 68 local veterans, something I witnessed that I will never, ever forget. And you know I'm talking about the honor flight. But we begin with one of the most historic appointments in Fresno Unified history. And frankly here, actually the nation. But it has also been met with some criticism, cynicism, and polarizing politics over the last couple of weeks. You know, we've heard from school board trustee Keisha Thomas. We've also heard from FTA President Manuel Bonilla, both offering their testimonials in the hiring process in the newly appointed superintendent of the third largest school district in the state, Misty Her. Now, this Wednesday, her contract was finalized. Her salary, very public now, $385,500 a year. That will change July 1st of this year to the salary of $402,848. That breaks down to about $33,571 a month. We're going to talk much more about the salary a little bit later. But first, I want to introduce you to the person and the vision for the new leadership of Fresno Unified. That is Misty Her, and I want to welcome in the new superintendent to Sunday Conversation. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you so much for having me. And Yoda is my favorite one.
Really?
Yes.
We have something in common already.
We do. He's my favorite.
All right. Do you know how to speak backwards, though?
I actually don't.
Okay, yeah, me neither.
But I did pay a lot more attention when he was speaking backwards.
Right?
Yeah, you know how you lean in.
Exactly. So now we know something about Misty Her, the superintendent. There you go. What else would you like the audience to know? Who is Misty Her?
You know, I think, there's a lot that has been written about me. And I think one thing that people don't know a lot about me is that I actually, every chance, so this is a little something personal. Mm-hmm. I like to go hiking, but I like to hike in the dark.
With a flashlight, I hope.
Yeah, with a flashlight, but I like the dark because when I was growing up, I was really scared of the dark. And my baby brother, who has now passed from cancer, we were having a conversation one day, and he said, you should try to see in the dark, because when you see in the dark, you can see much better in the light. And so one thing I kind of started to do is sometimes I'll go hiking and I will do it in the dark, because when your eyes adjust to the dark, you start to really see things that you don't see in normal daylight. So That's something people don't know about me. And people think it's a little crazy, but I really like it.
How has that served you so far?
And it actually has served me really well, because, when you walk into a dark room and you turn off the lights, what happens to your eyes? It's all dark, right? But if you wait about like 2 to 3 minutes, your eyes start to adjust in the dark and you start to see in the dark. And if you just allow yourself to feel where everything is, you actually literally could start to go down the hallway or get down to the bathroom or without even turning on the lights. And what that has done for me is it's really allowed me to pause when things get really difficult in my life, personally, or, in my career, to really just stop and go, what is happening now? It feels a little dark. So what do I need to see in the dark so that when I do turn on the lights, I can see even better? And that's what something that I have used personally in my own life, personally and professionally, in anything that I've ever done.
You have a long background, over 3 decades of educational experience that helped you get to where you are today. I'm wondering, at what point did you say, I'm going to be an educator?
I knew that really young, and I think I knew it. I for sure knew it when I was in first grade. When we first came to the United States, I wasn't. We didn't come to Fresno first. We were actually in Garden Grove, and I was the first one to go to school in my family, and I just felt so lost. And then we moved here to Fresno, and the first school I went to was Jefferson Elementary School. And there, I just had a librarian that was so wonderful. And in my acceptance speech, I talked about how the very first book that I learned how to read was a storybook called Madeline. And she really, in that moment, I just knew, and I felt as a little girl, that I wanted to teach others. I didn't know if I wanted to be a teacher yet, but I knew I wanted to do something like that. And then I figured out, you can actually teach, you can go into teaching. And I think at the heart of who I am, despite all the positions that I've ever had, who I am first and foremost will always be a teacher. That is what I use every single time in everything that I do. And I always tell people there's 3 things I do and I believe in wholeheartedly is I'm always teaching, I'm always learning, and I'm always connecting.
I'm wondering as well, as you talk about this journey of education and you go all the way back to a librarian, I can go back to my English teacher in high school, Matt Martineau. I still have a relationship, much more on social media these days. We live far apart, but everybody remembers that educator. And I'm wondering from you, can you give something in your leadership skill set now that is going to allow you to remember that connection? Because you get bogged down with all the administration stuff, right? How are you going to make sure you step outside that box and be a leader for the kids and the teachers coming in?
I think one of the things I do all the time to keep me grounded is I spend a lot of time at schools. And in fact, the day, Thursday morning after the announcement was made, the first thing I did was I drove around schools. And I went so that I can really see, okay, these are the people I'm serving. And one thing I've never been away about, and I'm really big about getting in the trenches. And so one thing I did this year as the interim superintendent, and I've done it, in every position that I've had since I've been in the district office, is I take the time to go back and teach. And I go back and I will plan when something's really complicated. If I hear teachers are saying, hey, this is not working really well, or it's really hard to teach this standard or this new curriculum, I'll be the first to raise my hand to say, hey, will you allow me to come into your classroom and we can co-teach together and we can figure out what's happening. And that's the one thing I've been able to do. And I actually did that this year because there were a lot of concerns about the way we were building our scope and sequence. And they were saying that the scope and sequence doesn't really get us into really teaching our students because there's so varying needs that come into the classroom. So I actually went this year, utilized our scope and sequence, worked with a few teachers and lesson plan, taught and then co-taught and then taught on my own so the teachers can give me feedback. And I learned a lot, and they were right. there are things that we have built in our scope and sequence that if you have students that are coming in from varying degrees of, what they can be very accelerated or they can come in below grade level. And I found that we needed to do adjustments. And that's one thing I'm going back to my instructional team to say, hey, from my discoveries this year, we're going to have to make these changes, because I actually, worry in the trenches, trying to figure it out with the teacher.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Before we take our first break, there was that moment. You're named the superintendent. The vote was there. It was 6-1. Again, Susan Wittrup was the lone no vote. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But you had your traditional Hmong garb. Can I call it garb? Is that okay? On. And you had your supporters and your family, and this is such an emotional moment. You did the traditional Hmong bow. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're the first Hmong superintendent in the entire nation.
Actually, I'm the first in Fresno Unified. There is a Hmong superintendent already, and she was it happened last year. And she is in Winton.
Yes. Okay. So, but still very groundbreaking here, right? And I'm wondering from you, how much does that weigh on you as you get into this job of being the superintendent?
I think that when you're the first to do anything, there's just a lot more scrutiny and there's just a lot more eyes on you, right? And Fresno Unified being the third largest, there's no way, people are not going to be paying attention. But I think that I've been very fortunate that I've been able to do a lot of first. So I became the very first Hmong vice principal, in Fresno Unified, and that prepared me for what it kind of felt like. Then I became the very first Hmong principal, and then first Hmong instructional superintendent. And so that got me, I don't know if you ever get used to it, but that prepared me to know, okay, this is what I need to know. This is what's going to change in my life. It prepared me to have conversations with my own children and my husband and my family. But I could tell you, Alexandre, the enormous load you carry. I don't even know how to describe it, because all eyes are on you. And everyone is watching, and everybody is watching the imperfections that you have. And I'm not a perfect human being, and so, and everybody's like picking on those imperfections, and you just have to put on a brave face every single day, and you have to be resilient, and you have to be courageous, because everyone is looking to you to make decisions and to do what's right by kids. And I'll tell you that the Thursday morning after, when I was driving around schools, the enormous amount of pressure I felt was I looked around at those faces and I thought to myself, I cannot fail them. And that was what hit me. And I always knew that, but it hit me so hard, to the point where there are 70,000 students, 10,000 plus employees, and I refused to fail them.
I had Vong Muanatua on this show a few weeks back now, and everybody can go back and look at it. We had a deep conversation with Vong, and I asked him, because one of the reasons I had him on, and one of the big questions was, what's it like being the first Hmong mayor of Clovis? And I kind of want to, this is mostly quoting, and I want to share it with you because he's also Hmong. And he said, and this is quoting, he said, being the first Hmong mayor of Clovis, he said this: "It's good for a news story. It's good for those who make it important. It can be overplayed. What accomplishment is it to be the first Hmong mayor? Nothing." He said also, "Be the first to cure AIDS or cancer or to reach the moon. Those are accomplishments." Do you agree with that same mentality?
I completely agree with that. And in fact, I want the story to be written when I'm the first to take the district to cross the 50% proficiency mark. I want that story. You talked about Trustee Wittrup earlier, and she said, I will be celebrating in 5 years when we get the results. And I wholeheartely believe in that. It's a good celebration, and people are like, oh, this is historical, which, I'm I agree with, but it will be even more historical, because in the 32 years that I have been in this school district, we have never crossed the 50% proficiency mark for our students. And when we get that, that's something that I feel like that will be a celebration. When we get 80% of our first graders to read, that will be a celebration. When students leave our district and they go to college, or they go into a career or technical, whatever they choose to do, that they're not having to do remediation, that's a celebration for me. Someone asked me, they said, how do you want to change the city of Fresno? Because I'm so invested in here, and I love, where I live. That's why I have stayed so long. That's why my own child now is in Fresno Unified. And I say the way we're going to change Fresno is if we get every student on grade level, and because that means that more people will want to invest in us. More people want to come here. More people will want to businesses, right? And people who are entrepreneurs, who are investors. And I wholeheartedly believe in that. Vong's absolutely right. I mean, when you're the first, okay, that's great. But for me, an even greater accomplishment, and I want to make it clear, there is only one thing I want to do, and one thing, and that is to get results for our student in the most holistic way, so that we honor where they come from, we honor who they are, and their life circumstances, and their families, and their social emotional needs, but also their academic needs. And that's and our kids come already with so much that I think sometimes we talk about them as they come in and they have nothing to offer, when they have so much to offer.
All right, how do we get to that celebration moment? We'll talk salary. We'll talk about a major deficit facing Fresno Unified. Superintendent Misty Her is here on Sunday Conversation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Conversation here on KMJ. I'm Alexander Balakian. My guest exclusively here, Misty Her, the new superintendent of Fresno Unified, third largest school district in the state. Lots been printed, lots been said, and Misty Her talking for the first time since her contract has been finalized by the Board of Trustees. And let's talk a little bit about that, Misty. Obviously, everybody thinks it's a big salary, $385,000 now, and then in a couple of months, you're going to get another raise at somewhere north of $402,000. How do you put this into perspective for the audience? How do you explain it when we live in one of the most impoverished school districts in the nation? How do you explain that to families and teachers and the community? Why are you worth $402,000?
So, one thing I really looked at when we were negotiating my salary is I wanted to be really mindful because of the times we were in right now with our budget. But I also wanted to be equitable too, because the previous male superintendents before me got what they got too. And so I wanted to make sure that it was fair. And what I asked the board to do is I said, whatever you give me, I want to make sure that it's equitable and it's in line with what the other male superintendents prior to me got. And so if you look at my contract, it kind of mirrors what previous superintendents have gotten. I didn't ask for way above more. I didn't, ask for less. In fact, I think I stayed pretty much in the middle. And in my contract, to your point of after June, it's going to go up. And that is to get the same thing that the three male chiefs that are in the district are also getting. And yet, and another thing I did with that was I said, I'm only going to take the 1 year, which is next year, and I'm not going to take all the other years. So I forego all that. And I said, to be fair for me, I understand where the board's coming from. I understand that it is a big salary. And then I also looked at, and I said, I'll take, the what everyone is going to get in July, and then after that, don't give me any more, right? And I also looked at comparison districts. There were districts that I also looked at that only had 10,000 students, and the superintendent was making 300 plus a year in their salary. And so I understand where we live in Fresno, but I also want to be equitable, and I also want to be fair. I don't want to be shortchanged just because I'm a woman and I'm a minority. And in my research that I also did is that I saw that a lot of women, especially minority women and women of color, took less than male superintendents in the same districts that they followed. And so for me, I'm 100 way more, 200% committed to the district. I have a lot of opportunities where I could go elsewhere to do other work, but I choose to stay here because I believe in our students, and honestly, I do want to put something out there, Alexandre, because the other superintendents before me, their salaries were not scrutinized. And I'm just wanting to have a real open, honest conversation with you about all this, is that there were no games played about their salary. There were no, like, is she getting too much? Is she not getting too much? There wasn't that same pushback. And so I don't know if it was just the times that we are in now, but I often kind of wonder too, like, why am I being treated differently?
Yeah, and this is why you're here, so you can explain your side of the story, and I appreciate that. Because when people look, because it's so public, right? This is public. And so people will see you get a one-time stipend of over $9,000 between 2025 and 2026. They'll also see that you get lifetime benefits before 57 and a half years old. Do we celebrate half years old birthdays? I don't know. But 57 and a half. Well, most Fresno Unified employees, I would say the rest, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not very good at all this, but again, I'm trying to do my homework. They don't get lifetime benefits before 57 and a half, and they have to work 20 years in the district. Am I correct by saying that? Okay. So, I'm wondering, and now the district is facing a $40 million deficit. Explain why that this is still profitable for Fresno Unified.
And I think I want people to know too that, like, there's been questions about, like, whether is she qualified enough, right? Is she qualified enough? Is she going to be able to know how to do this? And she was part of being here in 32 years in the district, and we didn't see changes. So where are we going to see the changes, right? And I will say, well, I have 32 years, and I actually have 32 years of actually a proven record. If you go back to my days as a teacher, I was a very successful teacher. I got kids to read. I got kids who were in my class that were, students who were special educations that were able to read under my, when I was a teacher. As a leader, we got really good gains, at the schools that I led. And so I questioned too, like, around, okay, well, I was in the district for 32 years and we never hit the 50% proficiency. And so how come no one was questioning that before with the people prior to me, people who had worked in the district or, all of that.
So, and just so we can have some history and some background. Michael Hansen, Bob Nelson. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
Right. And I'm even thinking too, like, even when I was a teacher, prior superintendents to that, right? And so, why this salary and why, the lifetime benefits? Well, everyone else got it. All the previous superintendents before me, all the chiefs, have the chiefs that are on contracts that got it. And when I was a deputy superintendent, I also received it. And so, like I said earlier, I only asked for things that everyone else, received. And the stipends, like, I was being questioned about, oh, well, you get a $1,500 a month travel stipend, because I drive all around town. In fact, in my first semester as interim superintendent, I got to every single school, got to every single department, was in over 350 something classrooms, and in my first week as a superintendent, I've now gone to almost 10 schools. And so I go around to schools a lot. And so I think that what I ask is just, give me a fair chance to do this. Give me a fair chance to get out there. And now we have goals and guardrails. The board created goals and guardrails that they didn't make up from, thin air. It came from multiple community sessions from the community. And so now it's my job to go out there and accomplish these goals.
And that's the new bylaws that are now being talked about, correct?
Right. So yesterday's meeting with the heavy conversations around the bylaw 9000, and with those, it's not changing it to say the board's going to hand over all of the duties to the superintendent. In the work that we've been doing with student outcomes focused governance, there are really clear delineations between what is board work and what is superintendent work. And what this simply is doing in that bylaw is it's saying, superintendent, we're going to hold you accountable to make sure that you go and do all this. And I want to be very, very clear. Just because we have 4 goals and 4 guardrails does not mean that we're not going to pay attention to safety. We're not going to pay attention to the operations, of running the school district. I'm still going to be held accountable for everything that needs to be done. It's just that these 4 goals and guardrails are going to be the heightened focus, the laser-like focus that we are going to focus on.
What we talked about in our first part of the conversation, we talked about how we get over that 50 percentile of, reading and math, and how, kids have been left behind. And we can even see that the district has shrunk when we talk about enrollment, right? How do we get enrollment back up? And I talked to Keisha Thomas about this. She said not a lot of people are having babies, and maybe during COVID they moved them to private schools or out of the school district and all this other stuff, and maybe you haven't recouped some of that. But you talked about getting to that celebration. How do you reach that outcome? What's your timeline on that outcome? We know Rome wasn't built in a day. I get it. But how do you tell people we are going to see tangible change by next December?
So the goals and guardrails that I have established are 5-year goals, but there are interim goals and guardrails that help us to benchmark how we're doing. And we are creating right now, in fact, in the next couple of board meetings, I am going to be presenting publicly our monitoring calendar. So the public is going to know exactly in the 5 years when things are going to publicly come and how we're going to progress monitor. So we have a monitoring calendar that is going to be very public for everybody to see. And then we also have monitoring reports that are going to be very public for people to see, to say, this is the goal. So I'll take, for example, the early literacy goal. Our goal is that right now we are at 48%. And by June of 2030, we're going to get 80% of our first graders there. So with that, we've established like interim goals that is going to push us to meet that goal. Well, you're going to know because I'm going to repeatedly, publicly in board meetings report out how we are doing. And then what I'm doing right now is getting all of my whole executive team, all of our departments, and we're going to start to cascade everything down to the teacher level of what are those initiatives that are going to push these interim goals and guardrails, which is going to get us to meet the goals and guardrails. So that is work that I'm currently, when I told you earlier I was a little sleep deprived, because that's what we're moving into. And it's going to be very public. I mean, Alexandre, right now I am building with my team a dashboard. It's going to be a very public dashboard. And the first iteration of it is going to be ready by June, and I'm going to publicly present it to our board and our entire community, so that they know like how we're going to monitor these goals and guardrails, when, where, and how it's going to look. And it's down to by school, by grade level, by teacher, by kid.
Will it be classified also by
Yes, it will be by student groups. It will be by specifically by the goals, and so
So African American,
Asian American,
Mexican-American.
students with disabilities, all the student groups will be shown, and we're going to get it. And now it's not going to be perfect, right? It's going to take us, like at least a year to build this out. I'm in the very pilot stages of it, but it's going to be we're going to be able to feed real-time data in so that our team does not have to churn out, okay, we just took this assessment. It's going to take us 2 weeks as soon to build the reports out. It's going to look like it where, okay, we took the assessment. As soon as your results are in, it starts to feed into the dashboard, and we should have the real-time data. And that is really important because I believe Fresno Unified, we're very data-rich, but we're not data-informed. So we have a lot of data from a lot of different places, and we are not using the data to drive the instruction. And sometimes we get the data, but if you take an assessment and you don't get the results until 2 weeks later, that's too late to do something about it. I need to be able to have our students take the assessment. We take the assessment by like the 2 days later and do something with it. And that is what I'm trying. One of the things you talked about, how we're going to get there. That's one of the things about how do we get there, and to be very public with the data. I mean, I've heard a lot about, oh, Fresno Unified, you're scrubbing your data, you're hiding the data. I don't want to do that. The data is the data, and if it's not good, I'm going to say why it's not good. And if we go out to try something and it works, we're going to scale it up. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to be the first to own it, to say, we tried this, it didn't work, this is how we're going to pivot. And I better have the answers for it.
All right. Got to take a quick break. The Superintendent Misty Her. We'll talk with her more about mending fences, whether that be with one trustee and also the FTA. We'll talk about that coming up. Welcome back to Sunday Conversation here on KMJ. My guest this week, and we're basically doing the whole show because she's the new superintendent, making some history. But as she said in this show, the Superintendent Misty Her wants to be known for results and outcomes, and she's telling us how she's going to get there. But maybe we have to mend some fences before she can get to the next level. And some of those fences are with the FTA. And Superintendent, I want to ask you about this because Manuel Bonilla, the FTA president's been on this show, been out front with a lot of the media, and he's talked about how there was a poll that was taken, how the FTA didn't feel that they were part of the hiring process, how they feel some of these guardrails that are changing the bylaws, that it won't be transparent. They feel left out. He had a poll where the teachers said that as Misty Her in her first year as interim superintendent made the grade, so to speak. And their poll of, I want to say 500 sample size, said it was a grade of D. How do you feel about all that? I mean, what is the response, I guess, when you hear some of these things?
Well, I mean, anytime your face and your name and you're getting a grade for anything, of course you don't, like it, right? And it's not the best of feeling. But I do think that a lot of that stuff I try not to get distracted with because, like I've said, I want to be known as the superintendent who got results. And so I try not to let that distract me. I'll look at it and then I will go, okay, time to get back to work. Or I'll use it as in, okay, so it's a D. How do I get to a C and a B and an A, right? Sometimes I think it's fair. I actually don't, right? Because you don't see me putting out a survey to say how is the president doing as the president of FTA, right? But I mean, that's simply kind of not what I want to do. I want to work with with President Bonilla, and he and I have had multiple conversations about, how we work together. Now, the last month has gotten tense, because I have not agreed with some of the things that he has posted or some of the things that he has said about me. Here's the thing, you can say what you want to say and you can, put what you want to put. But when it starts to distract from students and the work that we have to do with students, that's where I'm not okay with. And I'm also not going to just be a pushover and just have you keep attacking, because at some point I am going to also speak my truth. And so, like when you say, how do we mend? I think we need to get back at the table. I will go towards President Bonilla all day, any day, to sit down. And I know that we are going to have our disagreements, and we are going to debate, but I want those to be healthy. And I want those to be respectful. And I also want him, as the president of the Teachers Association, to also own this work with me. Because I believe that, and it shouldn't just be like one way. So like when I disagree with you, or when I don't do something that you are recommending, it's because I have a different perspective, and I have a different way in which I do things. And so I don't think that it's that we don't want to work together. I think we have to find healthy ways in which we work together.
I do want to say this. Obviously, it's one thing as you talk about, you post something, you see something. You made an interesting comment in front of the entire board when they voted 6-1 to make you the superintendent. You said you were receiving death threats.
I was.
How many?
Lots.
What was that? I mean, explain that.
I'll give you one example.
You even got the first one.
Yeah, the first couple ones, I laughed it off, and it's never good, right? When your kid is opening up letters and, it's about your mom, right? And so I've had to had difficult conversations, and I have to say, I'm tough because I know this is what comes with the position. And I think the people who have had to pay the most is my family. Like I'll give you an example, and I've not talked about this. So you are my first person that I've shared this with. Like one of the ones was, watch your back because you're going to be 6 feet under soon. Or your people, you're going to be deported. Can't wait for you to get deported. Things like that that are coming to my home. If you love those illegals so much, go join them in Mexico. That's the kind of stuff I'm getting. And this is the first time, so I'm sorry, it's a little hard for me to even share it with you, but that's what I was getting.
I appreciate that you did. I know that that's extremely tough. So it's been a whirlwind. Your life has changed enormously. Have those death threats dissipated?
When I get an envelope that I don't really know what's in it, I don't open it anymore. My assistant now goes through my mail and my emails and stuff, and she's very good, and gosh bless her heart, because she's so wonderful. She has to put up with me. She will just say, you got some emails, I took care of it. And she'll do what she needs to do with it. She'll either report it to safety. If it's something that I really, in the last search, I had to do a police report because it was getting to the point, and my staff was starting to feel uncomfortable too, and my family was feeling uncomfortable. I now have cameras all over my house, and I never had to do that before. And really, it's because for the safety of my young son, I have to unfortunately do that now. I never thought in my life that I would be able to do that, or like when I'm going in public now, I'm having to be very aware of my surroundings, because I've been approached.
Time has flown by. I only got a couple of minutes here, and I did want to get to this. You're facing a $40 million deficit. You're probably going to face some legal challenges as well. That's been reported. You've already said to me, can't talk about it. I understand that. So I don't want to waste any precious time on it since you can't talk about it. But I do want to talk about the $40 million deficit. And I know designated schools has been on the discussion chopping block, if you will. But let me ask this. We talked about your salary, but there's administration salary, your team salary. And a lot of people think it's a bit bloated. Will salaries from administration level, kind of like a Doge effect, if you will, I don't like to use that term because that's a national thing, but will there be some cuts made at the administration level because some of those salaries, people think they're bloated?
So, one thing that I've done, and I did this last year also when I was interim, was the first thing I did was I froze positions. And we are going back, especially administrative positions. And I will be the very first to say that if we get to a point where we have to do cuts, I will be the first one to take the cut as superintendent. I will be the first to do it, and I don't have a problem doing it at all. And I can confidently say my team, well, also my executive team will be the first to do it too. We are in a situation where Fresno Unified, we are in declining enrollment. Our enrollment has not picked up. And ADA, average daily attendance, with all the immigration and all the executive orders and everything going on, there are kids that we simply just cannot find to come back to school. And we've made home visits, we've gone out. I personally have gone out to homes too. And so we're going to have to find a different way in which we can recoup ADA. And that is really giving people a reason to come to Fresno Unified. What makes them come to our school district and what makes them stay. And I've been really talking to my entire staff about that we have to be the model for everyone, where the experience that they have with Fresno Unified is so good that no matter where they move, they still want to come to Fresno Unified. And that is what I'm striving for.
All right. I got to cut it there.
Sorry.
Our time is up. Guess what? We get to do this sometime down the road. Let's talk outcomes and dashboard and all that good stuff. I really appreciate your candor. We got to know Misty Her in a very different way, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We're back with KMJ. The one thing that I saw that basically had me in tears, hanging out with 68 veterans. Coming up next. Finally, it's that time of the show. Let's get social. And the goosebumps are still in full effect on me. Earlier this week, I had the chance to experience something that is truly more captivating than words can describe, but I'm going to give it a shot here. I had the honor of accompanying my dad, Frank, on a trip of a lifetime, the 31st Central Valley Honor Flight to our nation's capital. We joined 67 other local vets, spanning 26 hometowns, 9 counties, their years of service stretching from 1950 to 2003, from the Korean War, Vietnam War, and the Cold War. The trip was full of unity and love, emotion, and some really bad dad jokes sprinkled in between, right? The final day, our visit to Arlington Cemetery and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, a special tribute for this honor flight. A few of our veterans had the honor to lay a wreath where presidents marked the national observance of Memorial Day. The soldiers guarding the tomb, polished, precise, profound, in motion. A click of the heels saluting our troops who have sacrificed so much, and the many who sacrificed it all. Following this tearjerker already is where I became really overcome with emotion. Out of nowhere, a procession of elementary, middle, and high school students from Alaska and Illinois appeared. They formed this human tunnel, our local vets parading down the stream of thank yous and handshakes, hugs, and even handwritten cards were delivered. Strangers suddenly wrapped into this vortex of unbridled patriotism. I couldn't help but choke up at that moment, knowing that these kids suddenly knew the magnitude of what our vets felt was their duty, where bravery and courage and heroism was not on their minds, but just a word, freedom. That fight, those wars, those wounds, some visible, most of them not. They didn't question, they answered. And in the here and now, we live in a place that will forever be the home of the free because of the brave. Now, right before landing back in home, showered with a patriotic rally that leaves you in awe at the airport, mail was delivered. Yes, mail call for our 68 veterans. Envelopes full of messages, letters, and makeshift cards. I decided to write a letter of my own to each and every veteran on this honor flight. And I thought it would be nice if you heard these words as well. Dear veteran, it's been a journey unlike any other, a life worthy for the big screen. As we depart and head into the tunnel of patriotism, know that your impact on this community, this nation, and the world should never be understated. Let me be clear. You are the definition of courage, heroism, and the origin of the home of the brave. These past few days, you have relived the heart-wrenching past of why we celebrate our freedoms, an emotional recollection of events, some too painful to express. Far too many of our vets live with the guilt that they came home and their brother in arms did not. I pray that this trip of a lifetime has brought you peace and closure. Being a veteran holds a coveted place on this planet. Your service, your story, your bravery is oftentimes glossed over in our history books or taken for granted. A simple thank you is all you wanted. Well, I'm here to tell you that will never be enough. It's incumbent on us to make sure your story is handed down for generations to come. You are the true treasure of our community. Our riches and strength are shaped because of your sacrifice. Our stars and stripes are not only the fabric of America, but threaded by your courage to step forward and step into the line of fire for us all. God bless you and your family for making a sacrifice that most of us wouldn't dare. And for that alone, my family and I express our deepest gratitude and admiration. And that will never waver. And that's Sunday Conversation. See you next week.